Welcome, everybody. We're delighted that y'all are here on this Wednesday evening. Here in New Orleans, I think some of us are already getting distracted by some impending storm, but we're going to put that aside for the moment. My name is Ann Rolfus. I'm the director of the Louisiana Bucket Brigade.
And I'm Lenora Gobert. I am the resident genealogist of the Bucket Brigade.
And we're excited tonight to bring you some information that we feel is real important. It's a great week to be discussing this. It is Juneteenth, the week of Juneteenth, to be celebrated and observed on Saturday. And I also just want to note for anybody who may not have seen the news that Sharon Levine of St. James Parish, or the leader of Rise St. James, was awarded the Goldman Environmental Prize yesterday. It was a big honor for leadership in taking on Formosa. And so we're happy about that. And let's just dive into the subject matter here. We are going to send you a follow-up email with some events that are happening this weekend. Some of them might be postponed, but some Juneteenth events that are happening this weekend. The way we're going to work this is I'll speak for a short time, and then I'm going to hand it over to Lenora to really go into the guts of this. But before I go into my piece, I just want to acknowledge that there are other people along the Mississippi River and along Cancer Alley who are using the power of history to stand up to the petrochemical industry. On the call tonight are some of those people: Myrtle Felton with Inclusive and Ms. Barbara Washington. Myrtle, you can give a little wave so everybody can see you. And sisters from Wallace, Louisiana, Joy Banner and Joe Banner, as well as Jordan Brewington. They have a group called the Descendants Project, which is a great, great thing. Pam Spees with the Center for Constitutional Rights, and also Justin Craig, who works with a lot of us. He's a great cartographer and urban planner. So just a shout out to everybody. This is a collective effort, and we're so proud to work with everybody on this. So I'm going to speak with then Lenora, and then when y'all have questions, we really encourage y'all to just unmute yourselves, and I'll manage the question. I'll probably roll up to the screen and do that, just to speak, ask your question, or you can always do that, type it into the chat thing, but definitely feel free to speak up. So here we go. What in the world does genealogy and historical research have to do with environmental justice and with standing up to the petrochemical industry? Well, it has a lot to do with it. And the way that I got my education on this is from a woman named Margie Richard, who, when I first moved home to Louisiana back in 1999, she's the one in the parish of St. Charles Parish who would invoke the slave revolt that happened there. It was the largest slave rebellion in U.S. history. She invoked it in their fight, and she would say, if my ancestors can stand up to slavery, I can surely stand up to shell. She's the one who first started using the power of the past, and why don't we get a picture of her on screen? I'm going to roll up and just change a little bit in my view here. That'll help us. Let's see. There we go. All right. So she's the one. This is Margie Richard. The smaller picture is a more recent picture of her just from last month. But she's the one who invoked the past to give power to today's movements. And I feel like the Bucket Brigade's application of that, our use of it, really stems from her education of me in that regard. And so I remain grateful to her, and I still go to her and seek advice all the time. So let's go to the next slide, which is a more modern version of the people who are teaching me to use the power of the past. With her hand in the air, go back. Whoops. With her. There you go. So this is a picture taken in St. James Parish on the site of a burial ground of people who were enslaved on what was the Buena Vista plantation. In this picture are St. James residents. From left to right is Sharon Levine. In the red pants is Barbara Washington. Next to her is Stephanie Cooper. With her hand in the air is Gail LaBeouf. And then in the hat is Myrtle Felton, fashionable as always. And this is a Juneteenth commemoration from last summer. And there are a couple of things that this picture tells us. One of the things that the Bucket Brigade really prioritizes is listening to people from the communities and then putting technical resources behind what they say. So in the case of this burial site, it's on the proposed site of Formosa Plastics. And Gail LaBeouf, whose hand is in the air there, she was saying from the beginning, there are burial sites on that property. There are burial sites on that property. And so she said it so much that I heard her, and we began to pull in some other people to look into it, including Justin Cray and Pam Spees, who I gave a shout out to at the beginning, a lawyer and a cartographer who did a public records request and managed to figure out that, in fact, there not only were there graves on that site, but Formosa Plastics, throughout the permitting process and throughout the parish approval process, had known about it all along and had tried to keep it a secret. Now, why would they try to keep it a secret? Because you can see, even from this picture, the power that communities get when you understand that you have a cultural right to this property. No longer is it just an empty field that Formosa can pave over, but it is your past, your ancestors, your community, and they need to get the hell out of Dodge. So does Formosa Plastics go quietly? Are they not just shamed once the community exposes that in fact there are people buried on that site? Do they go quietly? Well, let's go to the next slide. And you can see their quote to the advocate: as the project progresses, FG, that's Formosa Plastics, will follow all applicable state and federal laws in regard to the burial ground and public notification. Parks wrote. Parks is their PR person. So she's saying they're going to follow all state law, but state law will allow them to just dig everybody up and move them, right? And so what we're doing with this is we're making sure that the St. James residents have a claim to that property. And also it's a very, very powerful narrative point, right? So who are you going to be for? The Taiwanese company coming from out of the country to come and dig everybody up and move them? Or are you going to be for the St. James residents who have ties going back to the 1800s? It's been a very important part of our media story and a very important part of the narrative. So go to the next slide, please. And I don't know if the whole quotes are showing up for people or not. No, the next, oh no, sorry, go back to the previous slide, I'm sorry. And then you can see if you scroll, can you scroll down and get it on the screen? I don't know if it's showing up for people, but the other quote there, and I'll just read it if it's not showing up. The other quote that Formosa had is that despite assertions made by outside groups about ancestral ties, no archaeologist has been able to confirm the identity, ethnicity, or race of the remains on the Formosa property. And so you can see that they're trying to dispute who is even buried there, even though it's a mass grave on the side of a former plantation. You know, who do you think is buried there, right? They're trying to dispute it. And it's why Lenora's work is so important, as she'll go into, that we have the narrative fact, we know what the community is saying, we know that there are people buried there, and then Lenora helps us weave it all together by actually finding the documents to support the case. So go to the next slide, please. And this is a picture from outside of a courthouse in which we were able to go to court. And when Formosa actually wanted to say that the community should not be able to go onto the property, that the community has no right to the property, thanks to the Center for Constitutional Rights and the residents of St. James who asserted themselves in court, they were able to, the judge ruled in the favor of the community and said, yes, in fact, the community absolutely has a right to go onto that property. You can end the slideshow now. And so you can see with all of Formosa's kind of machinations and those silly quotes, right? We don't know who's buried there. We'll follow the law, which can sound really good. That's not enough, right? And that we need some muscle behind the very astute observations of all the people in St. James Parish. And so let me just ground you a little bit before I hand it over to Lenora. Buena Vista is the name of the burial site. So when you hear her refer to that, we like to refer to it as Buena Vista and certainly not as Formosa. And everything that Lenora is going to go into, it's all about, we're giving you this kind of as a case study of the descendants of this particular property. There are all other uses of history along the river. But this is about expanding the pool of the descendants so that we have a stronger voice to get in the mix and to halt Formosa. And that's the direct line between this genealogy and this historical research and environmental justice and standing up to the industry. So I'll hand it over to our secret weapon, genealogist Lenora Gobert.
I've never been called a secret weapon before, but I'll take it.
Yes.
Thanks, Ann. Yes, I'm Lenora Gobert, and I have a lot of experience in doing genealogy research, probably for 12, 13 years now. And the way I got into this was actually wanting to find out about my own personal family, because I knew nothing about them. Found out that all 4 of my parents were born in South Louisiana. And I thought, that's interesting. And I knew with a name like Gobert, there had to be a connection already, right? So I started doing research on my own family, and through this research journey, I have started researching in about 4 or 5 parishes where my family, where my ancestors come from, and getting a real grounding in the tools that are available in Louisiana to do research on families, which are absolutely fabulous, more fabulous than probably any other state. And that's because of the history of French and Spanish background, and also the Catholic Church being here. Everybody wrote records about everybody and everything. And so there's a lot to be had here to document people's lives. So that's my experience in genealogy, and I'm loving every minute of it. And I'm so happy to be able to use my experience for this kind of a purpose. This is very, very rewarding. So let me start off my presentation part of this with a quote from W.E.B. Du Bois/Du Bois. In 1934, he wrote, "Few today are interested in Negro history because they feel the matter already settled. The Negro has no history." In 2021, many feel if there is a history, it's expendable. And so we are definitely showing them it's not expendable. We are building a cultural defense against the petrochemical industry. So I'd like to present two separate sections. The first one is to talk to you about the work that we're doing here, expand upon what Ann already told you. And then the second is to talk to you about some of the tools that we use to do this research and get to the end point that we want to get to. So some of the work initially is tying the families to the land. And 2 families that we're working with right now, one is the Winchester family, which some of you may be familiar with. They're an African-American family that claims a direct line to the Buena Vista plantation and the burial site, as Van said. Now, logic tells us that if people were enslaved on this land and they died on this land, chances are they're buried on this land and not anybody else. So if we keep that logic in mind throughout this process, it makes sense what we're trying to do. And what we have to remember also, though, in South Louisiana, and I just talk about South Louisiana because I really don't research the northern part of the state or other states that much. Many families are associated with a particular plantation, and they may share the same surname, but they also may be DNA descendants of the plantation owners. So there are 2 ways they could be associated with plantation, and we will explore both of those if we can. So what we're doing is helping the Winchester family to build out their ancestral ties to land. Some of you may be familiar with Gary Winchester, who has had a couple of articles written about him. He has made the statement about the Winchester family being directly tied to Buena Vista and the burial site. And he's been written about in a couple of articles. He gave a deposition in the fight against Formosa Plastics. And he has put together a database of the Winchester family as he knows it. And he and I worked together, and I know that he told me that there are more than 200 current descendants of the Winchesters in his database, and I'm sure there are probably many more that he hasn't captured yet. So we're building up a big pool of the Winchester family that we can use to help in our fight, which is fabulous. Now, the second family, let me just say also that one of our community members who is in Rise St. James is a Winchester descendant. Can you put up that first image for me? And just to show you, give you a little bit of a visual of what I'm talking about. On the right side, you see the entire lineage of our Rise St. James member. And the right person, the person on the left is always the paternal side, the father's side. The person on the right is always the maternal or mother's side. So her mother is a Winchester. And then if you follow the paternal side all the way up, you see where the arrow is, there is William Winchester, and his nickname is Lot, which, if you know anything about Louisiana, everybody has a nickname. And that makes it interesting and doubly difficult to find people in the records because they don't always have their Christian name, as they call it. They will be in there under a nickname. like T or Lot or Pookie or something that makes it a little bit difficult. So, if you talk to the families, they'll probably tell you who's who. But anyway, so if you see that William Winchester there is born in 1854, and that means he was born in slavery. So we already have that tie back to an enslaved person who is a Winchester, who may or may not be associated with Buena Vista Plantation, but we'll see. So I will switch to another family that we're working with in St. James, which is another community member, and she's an activist whose ancestor purchased land in 1874. So already there's a tie to the land. And these people, the ancestors of our current family is, when she bought it in 1874, they worked and held on to it so that the ancestors still have that land to this day. So there is a direct, tangible tie to the land in this area. And we're really excited about finding out how that happened. So our work continues there. So those are the two families that we're working with right initially to build up our story. So let me talk now about some of the tools that we use. And we use a lot of tools, but these I'm calling like maybe 5 main tools that you want to start with or work through to get to the information that you need. And what you do is you start from an umbrella approach and you narrow it down as you find out more information. And the first tool that we use is online resources. And those typically are ancestry.com, the behemoth of the genealogy world, which is a paid site, and familysearch.org, which is the site of the Mormon Church, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you don't remember who they are. And I use both of them, and we should use both of them when we do our genealogy research, because the people who transcribe the documents don't always transcribe them as accurately as they should. And many times on Ancestry, they don't look quite right, where you go to Family Search. Gee whiz, you found your people. So you have to go back and forth with both. And Family Search has some collections that Ancestry just does not have. So you need to use both. And they both have all the censuses, which is the census was taken every 10 years. And so they all have those, and that's how you follow your family. But they have city directories, they have military documents, and a whole lot more. But what you want to start with is the census. And if you put up the next document for me, what I like to talk about is each census has interesting information, but the 1880 census for me is key, because in the 1870 census, if you think about it, it came out 5 years after the end of slavery. So people may not be in place, they may be wandering around. I call it the hit or miss census, because you just can't quite capture everybody. And if you go to the 1890 census, unfortunately, it was housed with a lot of other documents, federal documents, like files from the military of World War II. My father's file was one of those, and that warehouse burned. So all of those documents are gone. Now with the census of 1890, most of it burned. There are a few fragments that weren't, but they weren't from Louisiana, so we can't use it. So that's why for me, the 1880 census is the key and critical. And what we see here is in the 1880 census, we see, guess who? Our wonderful guy, William Winchester. And you see he's 26 years old there. So if you subtract his birthday, his age from the 1880, you know that you find out that he was born in 1845. So that's how we figure out when he was born, because of course there were no birth certificates. Let me clarify. You can find them sometimes, but not in these documents. You have to really search. So if you go up to the top, you see this part is very critical when you're looking for somebody. They always show where they took the census. And in this case, it's the 5th ward. And that's because people in those times tended to stay in the same place. Some people did move around and travel and whatever, but if you had a family and you knew the area and you were just out of slavery and you didn't have anything, this was what you did. You stayed in the same place. So you want to know where the family was located, in this case, the 5th ward. Okay. So can you go to the next slide, please? I'm sorry, go back, because I forgot one other major source, online source, which is Google. Google is a fabulous source for researching. Google will bring up anything and everything that you search for. And if it doesn't if what you're searching for does not appear today, wait 6 months or a year, and somebody will have put it online so that Google will find it. It's a fantastic resource, and you'll find out later as I move down through this presentation how I use it to find some really critical pieces of information for what we're looking to do. So, okay, now we can go on to the next one, which is our next or our second source or tool that I like to use and that we should always use is maps. And I know we have a cartographer in the group, so you'd be happy to hear about this because you must understand the geography of where the people live and how they interacted with people around them, because everybody in these parishes had relationships. Black people, white people, mulatto, whatever you want to call them, they all have relationships with each other, whether they were enslaved or not, they had relationships. And so when you're looking for documents, it's critical to know and understand who they were next to, who they knew, and what interrelationships they had. So you want to know what the geography is of the area that you're researching. And then if you look up in the corner, I find this one interesting. You go all the way up to the top, you'll see the Sunshine Bridge, and at the very tip top where the map cuts off, that's Buena Vista Street. So that kind of puts the perspective for you on where this property is that we're looking at. But also just keep in mind how the river runs, because the next image shows you another map that you should always pay attention to, which is your ward map. William Winchester was in the 5th Ward, so you know that he was on the west side of the Mississippi River, and that's where you want to look for him. Our other St. James family that bought the land in 1874, they were on the 3rd Ward. Their land is in the 3rd Ward. Every census that I documented them down to the present day, 1940 is the latest census we have, so that they are in the 3rd Ward. So you know that family stayed there. So there are a lot of people who have the same names when you look in the census. So you don't want to be distracted by the first person you find, and that's my ancestor. No, you have to look at more things. You have to see where they live. Does this make sense that you found somebody in Ward 6 when all the other documents say they're in Ward 3? So these are important things to pay attention to. So the third tool that I look at, and this is a special collection that most people, they don't think about it because it's very, very difficult to work with. And that is the Freedmen's Bureau. Because documents on Ancestry or Family Search or any of these major genealogy websites, they're all indexed. If you search for something, somebody's name, a location, anything, they're indexed so that you get a result right away. The Freedmen's Bureau records are not indexed. They all, and all the images are there, but you have to know what you're looking for to be able to hone in on anything specific to find something that you want. So it's very difficult, but now this goes back to my Google search. If we can go to the next slide. In my Google search, I'm kind of moving back and forth. In my searching, I'm moving back and forth between the two families that we're researching because it's easy. And if I'm doing something in one database or something, I'll search for one family and then switch to the other one because stay in the same one and just do what you need to do. So I was been thinking about Buena Vista, and I didn't have that much information on the site itself and any connection. So I thought, okay, let me Google search Buena Vista and see what happens. Well, what's interesting is that I said that the Freedmen's Bureau does not have, their records aren't indexed, so you can't search them. But Family Search has indexed a few of them, which is fabulous because after I Google searched, one of the results was on Family Search with these payroll sheets of laborers employed on former plantations. And this is just an example of what I found there, because these people are, after slavery was over, the Union Army, the federal government, through the Union Army, set up the Freedmen's Bureau that used to be called the Refugees, U.S. Refugees, Freedmen and Abandoned Lands. So in actual fact, it encompassed everybody who was a refugee or who was a free person or who had abandoned their lands, which included Black people, white people, everybody. And so it eventually became the Freedmen's Bureau because it ends up focusing mostly on the free people. So this is a document of when people started working after the end of slavery. Now, slavery was ended in officially, I think, April of 1865. This document is August 1865. So you see how quickly this whole system was set up to help the freed people get work. These were the former plantations that many of them worked on, and the Union Army set up a system with these former owners to employ newly freed people. So if you go to the next slide, you'll just see an example of that was the cover sheet. This is the inside where they list all of the people who are working for them at a given point in time. And it shows everybody has a last name here, which is really interesting. By now, these people, if they didn't have a last name before, they've taken on a last name, but they are still listed alphabetically by their first name. So it shows when they worked there, how much they made. It's small, so you can't see it, but I'll just tell you. So it's a snapshot in time of what these people were doing. And in this particular family, what I found was that all of the adult people, and that's usually anybody over 12, sometimes they had people younger than 12 working, but anybody over 12, they were working together and earning money. And over a 9-year period, from the end of the Civil War until 1874, they amassed enough money so that the patriarch of that family could buy this piece of land in St. James Parish that they still have today. So to me, that's a fabulous story. Now, the other interesting thing that came up in my Google search for Buena Vista is one of the documents that Family Search indexed, which is, next slide, please. Some of the military men, usually captains, those kind of people, they were made agents of the Bureau. And what they did was they kept a running report of what they did every day. And this one came up because on December 26, 1866, it shows that I'm sorry, I should have said his name was Captain Brow. He went to Buena Vista Plantation to talk to Mr. Winchester about some issues having to deal with paying his employees, which were the ex-free people. But here we have, this gave me goosebumps because here we have the direct tie, Buena Vista and the Winchester family. Now this was the planter. This wasn't the families that we know today, the African-American families. This was the planter. But this is the Winchester family associated with Buena Vista. And so that gave me if not a starting point, at least a upper end starting point to look at Benjamin Winchester and his association with Buena Vista and how he may have acquired people and enslaved them and how they may end up being the ancestors of our current Winchester family on Buena Vista Plantation. So, love this one. The final tool that I want to talk about today is local histories. And again, credit Google. One of the results that came from Google was a book, because some of you may know that Google has been digitizing all of the books that no longer are copyrighted. So you can search for anything on Google Books and it will give you results of that search. And again, searching for Buena Vista, I got a hit in a local history, and I will just show this one here. It's called Cabanose. I don't know how you really pronounce it. The History, Customs, and Folklore of St. James Parish by Lillian Bourgeois. And what this book ended up having was 3 references to Buena Vista in the text. And these local histories are typically written by people, longtime residents of the area, who know details about the cities, the towns, the people, and the parish that academics don't know. So these can be a very valuable tool in finding out about really lower level details that you won't find in other sources. So that is something that we should always use. So with those details, with all that information that I found today, which is so fabulous, knowing that I can come from around 1822 with the planter, William Benjamin Winchester. I found out his first name is William, which is interesting because names flow down through families, and William's a very common name, but if we keep finding William all the way down through the African-American families, that's kind of a clue that they might have been closely associated. It's a loose one, but it happens. And so we will continue researching from that starting point with William Benjamin Winchester from about, I don't know, probably around 1820s, and then going back in time from our African-American William Lott Winchester, born in 1845, and try to see if I can connect those two. And that's my chore now. So the research will be on Benjamin Winchester. I missed the last piece. Oh my gosh, the last piece. Let's go on to the next one, which is really fabulous. One of the ones that I left out was going to the courthouse. How could I forget the courthouse? Now, but you have
Best for last.
the best for last. You have to know who you're looking for, obviously. And I know I'm looking for Winchester. I go to the courthouse, I look for the Winchesters, I find this document for William Benjamin Winchester. It's a sheriff is seizing his land, and actually it's going to his wife. And I'm not sure yet, I have to find other documents for that. But what's really interesting is number one, what they're going to inventory is his land. But the interesting part where the arrow is, number two, he has 97 enslaved people, and they're listed by their name and their age. And this is fabulous information. You usually don't find this unless somebody dies and their succession is open and they have enslaved people, and then you know who they are. But if that person hasn't died before 1865, you don't get a succession of enslaved people because they're not enslaved after that. So this is such interesting and great information because we can now look at these 97 people, try to figure out who they are through conveyances, because they were bought from somebody, through conveyances, and see if we can now pull down to the present day and find their ancestors to see. They may all be Winchesters because they took on the name. Some may be, some may not, because some of those people do have last names in the inventory there. So they probably would not make themselves Winchester. But again, as I said earlier, you could be a Winchester by taking the name, or you could be a Winchester by DNA. So we can start seeing who they may be. So I got 50 times goosebumps when I saw this document, because now we're starting to get people that we can trace, and that's what you need. So that's where we go from here, looking at Benjamin Winchester, his enslaved people, searching more for Buena Vista, the Winchester family before 1845, and all of the associated descendants from those people down to the present. So we're going to look like the Georgetown Project, you guys. GU2, you know what that? We're going to look like Georgetown with all of these people. So we're building our cultural defense against the petrochemical industry. That's why we're here.
Beautiful. All right. Yeah, I think we can take questions now. What can I possibly say after that? Please, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. I'll check the chat in a few minutes. Just doing a little time check here. Yeah, we have about 15 or 20 minutes for questions. So just unmute yourself and speak up and just say who you are.
I'm Rosalind, and hi, Ann, and
I'm going to hang on while I put up my volume a bit.
okay.
Herself a historian asking this question. Great, go on.
My question is, have you ever had any luck with baptismal records? Because I know a lot of the slaves were Catholic and were baptized, and I didn't know if there were any parish records around there. I know there are in New Orleans.
Oh, I am so glad you asked that question, because if I started listing all of the sources that I'm using, this would go on for 2 hours. But yes, the Catholic Church, they are now doing a project where they are compiling all of the people with no surname, which you will include all of the enslaved people. They are going to publish that at some point, but it slowed down a little bit for them because their archivist left and somebody new came on. But they have them in their database. But you have to go to the Archdiocese, of Diocese of Baton Rouge to look in their database. So it's possible, and that's going to be one of the next threads that I follow through on. Are some of these people associated with Winchester, and are they baptized in the Catholic Church? Absolutely. Not only that, they weren't necessarily Catholics, because the priests came around areas where they didn't have anybody who was a religious person. They would come around and they would write down everybody's birth, whether you were a Methodist or a Baptist or whatever. If you happened to be one in that time and the priest was there, they would write down everybody. So it's a treasure trove, yes, the Catholic Church records, and that's definitely one that I'm going to be looking into.
Thanks, Rosalind. Another question? We have one in the chat, Crystal? No, okay.
Hey, this is Justin.
Justin, can we all applaud in place for Justin, right? You can applaud where you are. Great cartographer, urban planner, who's been really crucial. I could go on and on.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Well, save it. I want to get a question in. I'm just really impressed, Lenore. I never had a chance to meet you yet, but I'm really blown away by the stuff you've been able to dig up. I just, for clarity's sake, so the Winchester is the Buena Vista plantation? That is the primary parcel of the Formosa site?
What I have found is the connection between Benjamin Winchester and Buena Vista. Now, what I have not yet looked for is the map from that time period, which I'm certainly hoping that you can help me with some of these maps, because I have a map for some land that he purchased, but I don't think it's the Buena Vista site yet, but he purchased a lot of land. So I'm going to be looking for that. And I've been looking on the land management website to find these maps. And we need to make that connection.
Yeah. I'd love to work with you on that, but
yes, thank you.
How do you keep track of all this information? Do you have like a database that you've been doing all this stuff? Is it like, it seems like it makes your head spin?
Yes, for my own, let me just start. For my own personal family, I have my information in Ancestry, and that's only because one of my Gobert cousins started it, and I'm just building on what he did. But I also have my information on my database that's on my computer that I keep track of my family. Now, these two families so far, they're only two families, and it's interesting. I guess I've been doing this for so long that I can keep this information in my head, which I don't want to do because other people need to be able to access it. But yes, at some point, I probably need to put it in a database. But Gary Winchester already has most of the Winchesters that he's aware of in his database. So what I will do is give him this information that I have, and he can incorporate that into his database and just build that out.
All right, we have a question in the chat. Well, I'd like to say that, I don't know if y'all can see, but as Lenora's been talking, she's had papers and then she's thrown them over her shoulder, and now there's a stack on the ground. So that might be one non-official filing system that she has. Okay, do we have a question in the chat? What is the question?
Okay.
No, just if you could tell me all. All right, so the question is, does proving a connection to the land give legal merit to disputing Formosa's ownership? And it does not, but Pam, I don't think Pam did get on the call. Is Pam Spees here? And then Jordan, I don't know if you want to be put on the spot or not. Jordan, you can unmute yourself and say yes or no. Jordan Brewington is our other secret weapon, our legal secret weapon. Okay, I'm just gonna, but she was on, yeah, I don't not to put her on the spot. So if you remember the quote from Janai Parks that I showed in my slides, it said, we will follow all legal, all state law about this, which, they want to follow all state law because that means you can dig them up and move them. And we actually have an email from the Formosa lawyer, Marjorie McKiffin at Jones Walker, if anybody knows her, go talk to her at a cocktail party, who said, we'll be able to get a permit to move these people quickly, right? No problem. And so our work is to craft the narrative. I think y'all can feel it. There's tremendous power in this narrative. And so do you think right now Formosa is going to try to go and dig people up? That would be a really serious error. And certainly we would be in their way if they tried to do that. So the legal claim right now, no, we can't go in and stop them based on this. But there is a lot of other power. And we know from looking in documents that we've gotten through Freedom of Information Act requests, for example, at the Louisiana Department of Environmental, Louisiana Economic Development Office, that they're watching this closely, that they're really worried about, all the attention this is getting, because they understand too, the spiritual power, the narrative power, times are changing. And that's, again, as Lenora said so well, this is our cultural defense. Yeah, another question?
There's one in the chat.
Oh, we got one in the chat. Well, anybody want to ask one? Anybody want to speak up and ask one? We'll
Leo has his
bounce.
hand up.
Oh, Leo has his hand. Okay, ask a question, Leo.
There, okay. I didn't realize that Formosa owned the land. Could you tell me when they acquired it?
Justin knows that. Do you know when they got the land? I bet Justin knows that.
I don't know when they got it.
Justin knows. Justin, can you answer that question?
Yeah, let me pull up my database. I got a spreadsheet, but they bought the land in a few different parcels. It was not just one parcel, but there are different tranches, like these slices coming off the river, arpents of land. And they bought it mostly basically between 2016 to 2019.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the bits that's so nefarious in the parish, and Justin and I did a report about this, and he did all the research on it. If you go to our website, Plan Without People, we talk about how the parish made a so-called land use plan that prevents people in the two highest majority Black districts, it's the 4th and 5th districts, they're prevented from subdividing their land. And it has also been categorized as residential / future industrial. So you can see what that does is it preserves these huge parcels so that it's only going to be good for industry. It's pretty awful. So what's a question from the chat?
Are there physical markers on the property?
Of the burial site. Are there physical markers of the burial sites on the property? Well, Formosa went and put a weird fence around 3/4 of it. They've driven over them. They had orders from a federal judge to cordon them off and stay a couple hundred feet away from it, and they weren't adhering to that. We busted them on drones violating the orders. Well, a couple of things. We busted them on with a drone violating the orders to stay away. The good news is there's now a hold on their permit. Federal judge said they can't build, so they can't go anywhere near the grave sites. But I will also say that the Louisiana legislature passed a law this session to say that we couldn't send drones up anymore over pipelines. And I think it shows the power of this, right? I think it's a real response to what's happening on that land. Every punch we give, they run to the legislature and try to implement these dictatorial tactics that actually won't work. It shows our strength. Another question from the speaking people. I think we have something else from the chat, but other people want to speak up and ask a question. All right, from the chat.
This is from Joy. It says, we're grain elevators.
All right, yeah, Joy, I just want to acknowledge Joy Banner is on the call, and she said, or grain terminals or grain elevators.
It's Joe.
Oh, it's Joe. Sorry, Joe. That why? What a difference. It's Joe Banner. Joe Banner, they're doing great work in Wallace. They're with the Descendants Project and the group to stop the grain elevator there. Yeah, they want to put one in on top of a historic community in Wallace. That is also a project that will not happen. Other questions or other questions? Yeah. Got one.
Peter says in Texas, they also restricted the use of drones, being able to survey oil and natural gas development, calling it critical infrastructure.
Yeah, so the tool that they use, and Peter's saying they did it in Texas too, is to call it critical infrastructure and say it's going to be some big threat if you put a drone over it. Again, a sign of the power of this work. I'm going to wrap this up unless there's another. Oh, we have another question.
One more question.
Yes.
Has this amazing investigative work been used to stop other petrochemical build out other than Formosa?
Well, so the question is, has this kind of work stopped other facilities from being constructed other than Formosa? Probably so. You can't know everything. Actually, I know in New York, I think it was the Brooklyn, the Navy Brickyard, there's something about that they used the power of the ancestors to stop a construction of, I think, of a big incinerator. So I think it's happened around the country. What hasn't happened is we have not really sharpened our bow and arrow with this tool here in Louisiana. And I think the times are changing now because there's so much energy around it. You know, again, I'd like to mention Inclusive Louisiana and Myrtle Felton is on the call, and the Descendants Project. And we're doing this work and we're all working together. I think we're going to hit some new frontiers with this. And it's exciting. Is that a question that's just come up?
There might be a precedent for Native American indigenous.
Yeah, and certainly there were indigenous artifacts along the Bayou Bridge pipeline route. So we just really have lacked the capacity to go after it. And now we have a little bit more capacity, and there's great young people who are interested in it. So I think it's a new day. I would like to well, I'm going to end with one thought, but is there anything you want to say in your kind of wrap up? And can I give you just, can I give our standing ovation? I mean, this is so exciting.
Well, I just want to say that the work that we're doing here now, this infancy work, can lead to bigger things in terms of cultural development along the River Road. And if you think about whether you love it or hate it, what about our plantation? Whitney Plantation has taken this kind of history and turned it into an economic development. And ultimately, maybe not Buena Vista, I don't know, but if we keep up with this kind of work and what we're finding out, we could start developing an alternative economy along the River Road to help push back even more against the petrochemical industry that acts like this is the only way anybody can get a job.
And that's what I was going to say. And so part of that's great. And so part of our vision, part of the vision coming from the St. James community is, you know, not Formosa, what else should be on that site? Should it be an international center for the research on mass graves, right? I mean, there's so many other things that it could be. Oh, wait, we have one last question, and we're going to answer it because it's Antonia, great journalist. Antonia, do you want to unmute yourself? And
Hi. So, thank you, Anne. And I'm sorry if this question has been asked. In Formosa's plans, does it envision that it can continue with everything it wants to do and work around the gravesite? Has it put forward a plan where it can do that, where it can leave, as you were saying, leave the bodies where they are and still continue?
They contend that they would not be disturbing. Well, Justin, do you want to answer this? Do you have a sense of that?
Well, I mean, the thing that I guess we didn't totally mention is that there's more than just one grave site. So there's 4 grave sites that have not been fully excavated or explored. Or actually, what the real story is that the archaeologists that the contractor hired managed to not find them. They dug right near them, but not found them. And there was two other, well, there's, in addition to the Buena Vista Cemetery, there's this other Arcadia Cemetery, which is the one that would really mess up their plans. And if that cemetery, if they find positive evidence of remains, archaeological findings there, that one really puts a sinker torpedo in their plans. But you know, the Buena Vista the Buena Vista Cemetery, the one that we're talking about and the Winchester family is connected to, that one is outside the footprint. So as significant as it is for rallying and changing the conversation, it doesn't materially change the location of their facility. So I think we need to keep pressing on this issue, and actually that's why it's important to continue this train and expand the research footprint to get it to include these other cemeteries and these other plantations that were basically right there. You know, there wasn't just the Buena Vista plantation, there's the Acadia plantation and the Lauderdale plantation and other ones. You know, every plantation had a cemetery.
They live there, they die there, they're buried there.
And they want to, the issue with the cemetery that Justin is talking about is that it's a central operating unit that would be there. And so that's why it would really scuttle their plans. Barbara Washington, Inclusive Louisiana, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I'm sorry I got on late, but I didn't receive the email. But anyway, I got most of what you all were talking about in the last part of your discussion. And the question I want to ask is, are the archaeologists still doing work to find out if there are other, if they can find out some more things about the grave? Because I just heard the gentleman say that wherever there was a plantation, there were actually slaves buried on those plantations. And here on the East Bank, we have the Colo plantation, we have Whitehall, and Shell has 2 burial sites on their grounds that the archaeologists did. They did find, and they have kind of like preserved the area where people can go and visit it.
Yeah, I think that's our challenge, right? It's our challenge to let's go find some more sites. And I think that's why it's great that y'all are doing this work with Inclusive and the Descendants Project, and we're doing it. I think we need to get on it. There's so much of this work to be done. And just to say, you referenced the Shell site. I know that none of us are content with that model in which the industry builds, they put a little fence around the remains, and then you have to go and kiss industry's ring and beg their permission to go and visit your family. No, that's how they've done it in the past. That isn't going to fly, and that's part of the work moving forward.
That's true.
And I think there's really something significant with Nucor, right? I mean, Nucor in your neighborhood wants to expand, right? And there's some issue with
right. That's correct.
Look, I even have the report on my desk of that one. Where is it? Well, my desk is messy. I should be able to just pull it up. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of this, and that's why we're excited about it, because it's a whole new frontier of resistance. And spiritually speaking, it's doing what Marjorie Richard said, right? Calling from the past. If my ancestors can stand up to slavery, I can stand up to Shell, right? Wow. I think we're going to close it because it is about 7 o'clock. If anybody has, things you want to follow up on, just email us. You're going to get an email from us in the next day or so with some Juneteenth activities this weekend, and you're encouraged to attend. But thank you.
Thanks for your attendance.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Really, really glad to see y'all. And this is just the beginning.
Glad to share what we're doing.
Good night, y'all.